So hello, everybody. This is the Self-Worth Talks, and I'm Suzanne McCall. And on this program, we talk all about self-worth and how people see it and feel it. And you work with people on how to reclaim their self-worth. So I'm happy today to have Julie Delucca-Collins, a business strategist and um, so much more, podcaster, author, speaker, um, family member, you name it, but who blends self-worth to everything she does. So welcome, Julie. So happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Suzanne. It's a pleasure to always speak to someone who is a like-minded individual. And, speaking of self-worth, as you're speaking about my titles, the first thought that came to mind is like, oh my God, why should you have to say all of that? And I thought, nope, that's all I do. And it's a matter of training ourselves, right? Into remembering who we are and not minimizing the things that are part of us, the skills that we have, and the places where we show up in the world.
Absolutely. Every time I've spoken to you, we're not necessarily talking about work, but who you are affects people and they're drawn to you, your family, friends, people in the world for that belief and commitment to self-worth and confidence, which comes from knowing your worth. So
Thank
it's who we
you.
are. It's who you are.
Thank you. And again, I think for me is the influences and the people that I saw and learning from others that, hey, I have my place, but yet it's it's those roots that I was given, but it's all about the implementation of what I was taught and the
Yeah.
daily work. Because by the way, if someone is listening, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's so confident. And this is what got me started in this journey. People would say, oh my God, she's so confident, she's got it together. And I don't. By far, we were just talking about lights. My husband installed new lights for me, and I was struggling. I was struggling with the lights because I thought, oh, this is terrible. I don't know. And really we are prone to being self-critical in
Yeah.
all aspects, not just our how we look, but who we are, what we said, and it's very easy to go down that spiral.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's such a metaphor of the lights, right? Shining
Yeah,
the
for
light
sure.
on, letting your light shine, letting yourself be seen. And yeah, it's absolutely. Well, speaking of who you are, I love to have people talk about their journey, like where they came from and where they are
Sure.
now and how they got here.
Well, I was someone that for very much of her life didn't know where she belonged. My mom is from El Salvador. I was born there. My dad is from New York City. He was born in Manhattan and he joined the Air Force, met my mom. And although we lived in El Salvador, I didn't really think I belonged at first because I was always told by people around me, oh, you're an American. You're
Oh,
not El Salvadorian, even though I was born there, even though my mom was
wow.
from there. And that was my main experience until I was 10, 11. Excuse me. When we moved to Miami, fast forward, I thought, great, I'm in the States. This is where I'm supposed to belong. And I didn't belong there either.
Mm.
I didn't belong there either. I had these visions of school kind of being like Greece, but I was no Sandy, Suzanne. I didn't sing, and certainly we didn't have this fun atmosphere in school. I didn't fit in with the kids that spoke Spanish because most of them were Cuban American. I didn't speak with the African American because my skin was too dark. I didn't, or too light rather. I didn't fit in and blend in with the white students because, well, I just was a little darker than them, and I felt um really sort of like the anomaly.
Mhm.
And this is the early 80s. I being the oldest, I had always been very outgoing. I had always been very much an extroverted, very gregarious child. And all of the sudden, I look back at this girl in sixth, seventh grade were really a defining moment for me. They were a defining moment in which I haven't told the story until recently. I started to share this as I'm preparing for a TED Talk, and I've decided that I'm going to talk about this. In
Mhm.
seventh grade, I spent almost half of the school year in the wrong class because I got to the class and I sat through the first class and it was very chaotic. I went to a very urban high school. And in the chaos, I sat down, but I was not in the roster. It was an eighth grade class, as a matter of
Oh my
fact.
God.
And I didn't belong. They didn't call my name, but I never had the courage to raise my hand and say I'm in
Oh,
the wrong class.
wow.
And the teacher never, like, he would take attendance, but I guess it was so chaotic, he never really noticed.
Mm.
Um, and then I remember thinking, and I never wanted to tell my mom. She was a single mom at this point, and really felt that it would be one more burden on her. Um, and I realized that was not who I was. I was always taught to speak up, to say what I was on my mind. I spoke to adults very easily growing up when we were in El Salvador, but I never envisioned that I would be this mousy little girl. And because I was afraid of being laughed at. I was afraid of being made fun of. I didn't, and the more that I stayed in that situation, the more that I didn't see a way out until I decided to take courageous action. And I went to see my guidance counselor and I told them what was going on. But that
What did
was
they do?
they're like, well, why didn't you say anything? And I said, well, I was embarrassed. I was
Hmm.
embarrassed that I was going to get
Hmm.
picked on. I was embarrassed that the teacher would yell at me. I was embarrassed and I didn't have a voice. And she said, it's okay, we'll fix it.
Ah.
And I remember then that for as hard as it was to take that first step, I needed to pick my heart. Was it going to be harder for me to stay in the wrong class and be totally lost, or
Yeah.
take that first step and come what may, start to stand up for myself? Because I knew that if I stayed in the wrong class, I would fail and it would be
Mm.
detrimental to me.
Hmm. Wow.
So that's what gave me the courage to take that first step and be willing to take whatever consequences. And I think that this is a metaphor also for life, that at times we stay stuck in the pattern of, the fear, the uncertainty, the shame, and yet changing is going to require courageous action,
Hmm.
but we're afraid.
Hmm.
And by
Yeah.
the way, for me it worked out, but there's other times in which I've taken courageous action and it hasn't worked out.
Hmm.
But I am proud of having had that courage and creating the evidence that I am taking care of myself. And that's what that self-confidence is about. It is about standing up for us, for the person that we see in the mirror every day.
Yeah. I was thinking that as you were saying that, all of this, that belonging, like we grow through this process. And I know you just wrote
Mhm.
your newsletter all about something about this, but as we grow, we start to redefine what it means to belong. And I think the more we, after a while, we learn we have to go
Mhm.
inward, we have to belong to ourselves, we have to
Yeah,
commit. And
absolutely.
that's the most
Absolutely.
important thing.
Yeah, and I think that throughout my life, at the end of eighth grade, I spent the summer with my dad in DC. And that was a time in which I kind of reconnected a little bit to myself. And I started to really embrace who I was, no matter what circumstances or groups. And then at the end of at the end of, well, no, but at the end of seventh grade, I spent the time with my dad. And then at the end of eighth grade, I went back to El Salvador for the summer to spend time with my grandmother, who was very influential in my life. And it was a very strong um, independent woman in the time that most women weren't. She was highly educated. She owned her own school. She was an entrepreneur of sorts, volunteered in many different organizations. I write about her in my book because I think that I learned a lot about being me and the tenacity from her.
Mm,
And I remember it was right before ninth grade, and in that summer that I spent with her, we talked a lot. We talked a lot about, how was school going, what was going on, and she said, "You're my granddaughter. I raised you to be who you are, and you should be fine being who you are."
mhm,
And though, the conversations didn't necessarily turn on a switch, but it started that journey. So then when I came back into the States for ninth grade, I came more into my own, and I wasn't
mhm,
afraid to be who I
mhm,
was.
mhm,
Um, and again, self-confidence is something that at times we don't feel it, but in those instances is where we again make the choice to put one foot forward. And that starts to create the evidence that we're getting better, we're learning, and we have to be okay with knowing that we're a beginner at anything that we're starting
mhm,
out.
mhm, mhm.
And at times when we compare ourselves to others is when that self-confidence is robbed. That comparisonitis robs us of our
Exactly.
self-worth,
Yeah,
of everything.
right. Well, we grow up thinking belonging means being like, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And all the messages you got from people growing up, like, oh, you're not really American, or you just that you don't belong.
Yeah.
They were like giving you that message. That's all they knew too. That's what kids
Hmm.
knew, that, you're not like us. So,
Yeah.
but those experiences that you had with like the guidance counselor who listened and took action, and then your grandmother and your father, those are so formative. And your
Yeah.
mother too. I'm sure your mother
Oh, for
really,
sure.
supported you.
There's times in which my mom, and again, I finished my book talking about my mom because my mom was Miss El Salvador.
Mm,
And and I talk about how no book in confidence can be complete without having a story about a beauty queen.
oh
And
my
I talk
God.
about and I talk about that, and I talk about my relationship with my mom over the course of the years is definitely shifted, evolved. It's complicated, as I think a lot of relationships between mother and daughters are, but a
Hmm.
lot of the lessons too that I have come from her willingness to take risks. She came to the States as a single mom. Again, it would have been easy to stay and have the support of my grandparents in El Salvador, have financial and emotional support. But she chose that she knew that, well, number one, there was a war going on, and she wanted to create a safety for us. My mom
Hmm.
had studied in the States too, so it's easier for her to be here.
Hmm.
But I watched a lot of that independent streak in her drive she always had it in her mind to give her daughters a good life, education, environment, a positive places and people that would influence us for the better. And
Hmm.
she fought for that. And definitely my sisters and I, the opportunities we've had are because of the sacrifices she made.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, can you tell us something like an opportunity that you had that you'll
Yeah.
always remember, and again was formative for you?
For me, one of the biggest opportunities that I think that has also impacted me is again, as a single mom, my mom made a decision that we were going to move to a very affluent area, and it was very difficult for us to move to a very affluent area in Miami. Um, but she wanted us to go to the best public schools. She knew she couldn't afford private schools. The public school that was one of the top schools in the country is where she wanted us to go to high school.
Hmm.
And by doing so, one of the opportunities I had, and again, I've had many in my life, in my career, in different instances, but I think that this put me in the right um, road for success.
Mhm.
Is the school where I went to, our latest Supreme Court justice, it was my classmate.
Oh,
So this
wow.
should give you an indication. It was a very competitive school, one of the top, still one of the top in the country, and in Florida for that matter. But I became very involved in our church youth group. Our church was down the street from school, and after school, because I didn't live close to the school or be within walking distance, I would go to church and hang out after school. And I would do my homework, and they had other activities for, religious education for younger kids. So I volunteered with them. And I also became part of that youth group, but they had a peer leader program. And that was the
Mhm.
first time that I was put in a position where I really had to show up as a leader.
Mhm.
And that continued to solidify in me my value system of service first and leadership. And these are
Mhm.
married together. And as
Mhm.
I went away to college, and in my career, service and leadership have always been the top of the list for me.
Mhm. Mhm.
And when it comes to my self worth, my self confidence, it's easy to put aside my insecurities. It's easy to put aside my needs when I'm in that area of service, when I'm giving to others, when I'm doing it for others, because that's what I'd like to do. And by the way, I receive a lot more when I'm giving to others.
Yeah.
Um, and as a leader in whatever circumstances, and seeking opportunities to lead also allows me to be open to sharing the platform with others.
Mhm.
And again, I am able to learn as a leader. And I
Mhm.
think that most people think of leadership as having it all together, getting all the answers. But
Mhm.
that's not what
Mhm.
leadership is.
No.
Leadership is really recognizing in others how they can step up, and facilitating for them that ability for them to do so.
Mhm. Yeah, those are powerful, powerful lessons. And it's really great that you were able to start that conscious development as a teenager.
Yeah.
Really probably helped you so much. So what do you do with people in your work now that you know about, that you've lived these values?
Yeah. So for me, again, when I started my company, I was laid off at the beginning of the pandemic, and I knew immediately. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I had a plan that in the distant future, I was going to start doing more consulting and coaching. But when I decided to launch my company at the beginning of the pandemic, I knew that I wanted to help, especially women. My last role in corporate America was Chief Innovation Officer for an educational company out of New York City, and I loved what I did. I was very good at what I did. We created
Mhm.
educational opportunities for for students that were low social economic backgrounds.
Mhm.
And we
Right.
also did a lot of teacher training. What I found in my career, and again, being in education, the majority of individuals who I came in contact with were females. And I would hear, I'm not, how come, you're so confident? I could never be that. How is it that you're so confident? And again, I went back to, thinking I just don't feel that all the time. It's not something that, oh, look at me, how confident. And yes, there's a level of outgoing, taking risks, but it's always about taking that first step,
Mhm.
even
Mhm.
when you don't feel it.
Mhm.
And I wanted to create a business in which I took what I knew and helped others really come into their own, really
Mhm.
pursue
Mhm.
their purpose. I felt at the beginning of 2020, before we went into lockdown, I was about to turn 50, and I started to really question, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
What in is there more? What am I going to do? How am I making an impact? All of these questions are not unique to me. I think that we all kind of follow a path. And for some of my friends that are very good at what they do and have been doing that, some of this begins to come up maybe when their kids go to college and they think, well, what's next for me?
Mhm.
For some of my other friends, it's they've done the corporate career in, in the for-profit and realize like, well, what if I went into the non-for-profit? And there's so many times in which we have the world ahead of us and we make choices based on what we were told or what we heard we needed to do. And yet we didn't necessarily take into account what we wanted or what we could dream as possible for our lives. So
Mhm.
Go Confidently Services, which is my company, is designed to help individuals get the tools and support to go confidently and pursue their passions and purpose, whether it be building a business, whether it be becoming a speaker, whether it be maybe growing in their career. I predominantly work with entrepreneurs now.
Mhm.
We also have a podcast production company in-house that came out of sheer, I wouldn't say luck, but coincidence. When I started my podcast, my husband is the one who got my podcast started. I was turning 50, like I said, and I didn't realize that this lockdown was going to be a little longer than 2
None of us
weeks.
did.
None of us did. And I was planning a big birthday party for myself to celebrate the 50. And when he realized that, hey, my wife just lost her job and she's not having her big party, I need to distract her with something because
Oh
she's
my
in
God.
lockdown and she's that extrovert that needs to be around people. So he ordered the podcasting equipment. And that's how Casa de Confidence was born.
Yeah, I love that
And
because I listen to your podcast and I love that
okay,
he is with you on that
yeah.
podcast.
And it's funny because he had no intention in being part of the show in
Yeah.
any way, shape, or form. He
Uh-huh.
did say, he's like, I will edit it for you, but you start it. And the first show, I sat down to speak and I thought, no, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. You need to do this with me, which is a lesson, by the way, that even though I can talk and I can share and I can speak on multiple topics, sometimes we need someone by our side to
Yeah.
take that first step. And that's
Mhm.
if you go back to the first episode, he interviews me for the first episode.
Oh, I love that.
We just revamped episode I think it's 187. He actually goes back and he does a follow-up interview and says, okay, it's been 3 years. And
Oh,
it's a special episode as well. So it's been really fun. But really that's what I hope to do, is to continue to help individuals with the tips and tools. And I'm a certified coach in tiny habits. So I really use the framework of tiny habits to help
mhm.
individuals
Mhm.
find that confidence, build the evidence by the actions that they take daily. I use a framework to help my clients who are business owners who are building a profitable business. I use the framework also to help them create the daily, weekly action that moves them closer to their goals.
Mhm.
And for that entrepreneur that's been around for a while but hasn't created the freedom or the consistency in income and have been, oh, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that. I use the framework that I use in corporate America that we use to build a business, a very strategic plan. And then I teach you the daily action and help you
Mhm.
build your confidence as an
Mhm.
entrepreneur
Mhm.
so that you can not only create the type of income that you desire so that you feel free in your business, but that you're also making that impact that you set out to make in the lives of others by starting your business.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting. So, and I think that this is something that people either in entrepreneurs or if you're working for someone, that
Mhm.
integrating who you are, your sense of purpose into
Right.
what you do sounds like where you help people. What do you think the biggest obstacles are for people in developing that sense of confidence and success in what they do?
I think that the biggest obstacle, and there's a lot of ways in we sabotage ourselves. Number one, we all have that inner judge that is always going to be telling us,
Hmm.
hey, you're not enough. Who do you think you are to do this? And et cetera, et cetera. And by the way,
Yeah.
all these sabotaging voices and behaviors that we have were really our defense mechanisms. We created them to protect ourselves from
Yeah.
circumstances as we grew up. And not that we don't necessarily, we had unhappy childhoods, but still these behaviors protected us and they became
Hmm.
ingrained in us.
Hmm.
Number
Absolutely.
two, when people are really struggling is because they are listening. And again, we have that negative bias in our brain. Our brain has our reticular activator is trying to keep us safe. And it's going to say, danger, danger, you're going into that new situation. Oh, you're going to go ask for a raise or you're going to launch a business. Who do you think you are? You're not enough. They're going to say no. And that is always going to be playing in the background. It's sort of that I'm going to date myself again. Sort of that jukebox stuck in that record that doesn't move.
Hmm. Hmm.
And we can't necessarily change the record, but what we can do is we can start to listen to something else.
Hmm.
And this is the most important thing that I help individuals with is create new messages for themselves. And we do so by creating awareness. Hey, what are you saying to yourself?
Hmm.
And what is that true? And questioning the belief as well, because I think
Hmm.
that we don't question the belief. There's other sabotaging behaviors that we have, and these are the other cast of characters and that we create. My accomplice saboteur, for instance, is that high achiever, and also
Hmm.
the one that is always restless. I start a project and it's like, oh, this is so great. It's so exciting. And then soon as you get into like the boring parts, you're like, okay, what's next? So that's a
Hmm.
sabotaging behavior I have. Many
Yeah.
of my clients, their saboteurs are the people pleaser. They have
Mm.
goals, they have dreams, they have things that they want to do. And yet they begin to say, oh, but I need to do this for my family. And they
Right.
start to put others first. They feel and their worth is going to come from what they do for others.
Yeah. Yeah.
And self-worth is always first and foremost for what you do for yourself
Yeah. Yeah.
and accepting that and being
Hmm.
okay that if you put yourself first, perhaps and it's not going to be pleasant for somebody else, but in the end, you're going to be a better person for it and be able to be and show up in all areas of your life in a better
Exactly.
way.
Yeah, I think that it's the whole airplane metaphor. You've got to take
Hmm.
the oxygen mask yourself to really
Yeah.
be strong and able to help other people take the oxygen. So if you create your own strong self-worth, you help.
Hmm.
That's how you help other people to
Yeah.
do the same. And yeah, you're
Yeah,
talking my
absolutely.
language with all this, and I would say, it's creating new neural pathways. Changing that
Absolutely.
record is, but it's
Hmm.
also tapping in, like when you were talking about your experience with a guidance counselor and what your grandmother taught you.
Yeah.
It's those neural pathways are in there
Yeah.
already. It's just highlighting them and bringing them more to the what you're doing is helping people
Yeah.
remember who they are and what they're
Remember who they
capable of.
are. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I equate this to the behaviors that we currently have that don't serve us.
Hmm.
They're sort of become superhighways in our brain.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you are willing to be curious and aware, then you can see that there is, like you said, that other pathway. And all we have to do is begin to travel on that and make it a road that is fairly traveled on, where then it begins to, we move back the brush and then we begin to have a little dirt road and then we start to maybe pave it and then we start to expand it, but it needs to be traveled on. And that's the power of behavior change.
Yeah.
Well, because And as a tiny habits, there's three things, right? There's three things that need to be in place. Your ability to do something new, the behavior, and then the prompt, the prompt that, reminds you to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
if I'm able to, maybe I'm not a great yoga person, right? I need to find the ability. When will I be able to maybe put my mat down and do a couple stretches? That ability. Now you have to have the prompt that reminds you. As I walk down the living room and there's my yoga mat, it's the
Mm-hmm.
prompt that reminds me, right?
Yes.
And if we marry that with an existing behavior, then the likelihood of something sticking and becoming a habit is much more able to do it. And we don't have to rely on motivation. Motivation at times, if things are hard, it's unreliable. So we
Yeah.
need to rely on that automation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Until it becomes like such a habit,
Yeah, for
then
sure.
you
It
don't, then
becomes a
it's
habit in
just,
itself.
then you move to the next thing that you have to
That's
work
right.
on. Yeah. Well,
Absolutely.
it's very interesting, and it's very, goals are reachable, but I
Hmm.
like that you had said that sometimes you don't have to be the one who does it all on your own. Having a
Yeah,
coach, having a therapist, having somebody that
right.
helps you, that we're human,
Absolutely.
we're relational. That's how we learn who we are, and that's how we grow. So I
Yeah,
think,
a
having
100%.
never to be feel bad about getting help to do
Oh,
what you need to
and and
do.
and that's exactly it. Like with the example of the guidance counselor that has stayed with me. And by the way, Suzanne, in my corporate career, I had just been promoted, I think, to executive director of my organization. And I had a major failure. And you know what it was? I didn't ask for help.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't ask for help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I did it again, maybe like a couple years later. Major failure. I didn't ask for help. When we don't ask for help, and it doesn't make us weak, it makes us wise to
Yeah.
know that we need somebody else to complement what we're doing. And the reality, when we talk about goals, I want the listeners to know that goals are actions. I'm sorry, they're outcomes. Goals are outcomes. It's not, I have a goal, and be very specific with what you're trying to accomplish. But
Mm-hmm.
more importantly, take action daily. Be tactical about your actions. And
Yeah.
that's what's going to help you to get to your goals. And the tactical part could be, I'm going to ask for help, like with me in the podcast, right? If I had a goal, and I talked about having a podcast forever. My husband was so sick about it. That's why he probably got this
Yeah, let's do this.
equipment, right? Let's just do it.
Uh-huh.
I never had a very specific, like, oh, by the end of this year, or I would like to at least have 2 episodes. Never had that. I just said, oh, I want to have a goal. That was a dream.
Mm.
I
Mm-hmm.
actually got the podcasting equipment and we said we are going to launch by April 26th.
Okay.
That became a goal.
Yeah.
And then
Very
the
specific.
tactics became doing the work daily. And I didn't know like, how do I do this? What's first? What's second?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. A great example of that. Well, wow, this has been like so packed with help and support and guidance
Mm.
for people who are trying to grow and do something different and who might be nervous. So, how can people find you?
Well, the best way to find me is to go to my website. My website is goconfidentlycoaching.com. And you can also find me on any of the social media platforms except Twitter. I don't hang out in Twitter.
Is there such a thing
But
as Twitter anymore? It's like
or X or
it's
whatever they
X.
call
Yeah,
it.
right.
Yeah, that's a dumpster fire. I'd rather not participate in.
Yeah,
So you can find me I'm Julie Delucca-Collins on all of the platforms. I mainly hang out in Facebook. Facebook is, the place that's easy. I've been there forever. Facebook,
yeah,
Instagram. I love Instagram
yeah,
as well. And
yeah.
lately, of course, I do have a TikTok, and that's just kind of a fun little place too, where, sort of like I look, I'll share, but Facebook is definitely the place.
Okay, well, thank you. And I'll put all that in the notes when we post this. And it's been such a pleasure getting to know
Oh,
you better and hearing all
thank
your
you.
story. I love it.
Suzanne, thank you so much for the conversation. Tuesdays are my favorite day. And the fact that I'm speaking to someone like yourself who gets this whole self-confidence, and it's very aligned with
Yeah.
my mission to help others in this world increase their confidence and how they make an impact is I love that. So thank you for the work that you do.
No, you're welcome. My pleasure. Okay. That's it for today, everybody. And we'll see you next time. Bye bye.